I'm Sarah Butcher, and this is the Side Comment. In this episode, Isabela Morales introduces us to the Townsend family and the specific opportunities and obstacles that they faced following their emancipation in the antebellum South through the rise of Jim Crow.
Hello, I'm Isabela Morales. I'm a historian of slavery and emancipation and the author of Happy Dreams of Liberty, An American Family in Slavery and Freedom. This book is the story of the Townsends, the enslaved children of two white cotton planter brothers, Samuel and Edmund Townsend, and several enslaved women that they owned on their vast Alabama plantations in the decades before the Civil War. In the United States, slavery followed the condition of the mother. That meant that no matter who your father was, black or white, free or enslaved, a poor farmer, or the president of the United States, if your mother was enslaved, you were born into slavery too. So the Townsends weren't only Samuel and Edmund's children, they were their property. Now, that didn't make the Townsends unusual. Enslaved women in the antebellum South were incredibly vulnerable to rape and abuse from white men like the Townsend brothers, who held such immense power over their lives. What was unusual about the Townsend family was how Samuel and Edmund viewed the children of these women whom they had abused. Neither brother ever married, so they had no wives or legitimate children to carry on their legacy. Their enslaved children were the only heirs they would ever have, and in their minds, that's what they were, their rightful heirs, despite their legal status as slaves. In his will, Samuel wrote that he wanted his 5 sons and 4 daughters treated just as if they were white children. In Samuel and Edmund's minds, these children were superior to other enslaved people and people of African descent because of the Townsend blood they had bequeathed to them. So when Edmund died in 1853, he tried to leave his 2 sons and 2 daughters almost the entirety of his $500,000 fortune. This was the largest bequest from a slave owner to enslaved people in Alabama history. And in today's currency, Edmund's $500,000 estate would be worth more than $17 million. Unfortunately, Edmund's will didn't stand up in court. But when his younger brother Samuel died 3 years later, in 1856, he left a very similar will, bequeathing his $200,000 fortune to his 9 enslaved children and Edmund's 2 daughters. These men were the antebellum equivalents of multimillionaires, and they wanted to leave their property to enslaved children who were themselves property. It was a shock to their local community and an outrage to the rules of white supremacy in their time. The children of a master and slave weren't meant to be acknowledged in court. They weren't meant to be freed. They certainly weren't meant to inherit wealth on this scale. But in 1860, after 4 years of litigation, the Townsends were indeed freed and began to inherit some of their father's fortune. That's just the start of the story. In the years and decades after their emancipation, members of the Townsend family migrated all across the country, receiving an education at Wilberforce University in southern Ohio, homesteading and fighting for civil rights on Kansas's Great Plains, serving in the Union Army during the Civil War, mining for silver in Colorado's Rocky Mountains, and even returning to Alabama to purchase a part of Samuel Townsend's old plantation where they had once been enslaved. In all of these places, the Townsends were seeking communities where they could build new lives as free people on the basis of equality with their neighbors, where they could pursue social and economic mobility using their dual legacies of wealth and mixed race ancestry to shape their own identities. They were pursuing the American dream. And their journey across the United States, as well as from slavery to freedom, took place during one of the most radically transformative periods in American history. Between the Townsend's manumission in 1860 and the rise of Jim Crow in the early 1900s, the Civil War ended slavery throughout the nation, collapsing the planter aristocracy of the South and throwing the country's racial hierarchies into a state of flux. African Americans won their freedom and citizenship. Black men won the right to vote and held public office at all levels of government, demanding justice from a political system that had never before represented their interests. This was a time of great change and possibility, and the Townsend story provides a window into the different ways that race and freedom were experienced during this particular historical moment. Now, the Townsends did enjoy certain advantages in their pursuit of social and economic advancement that the majority of freed people didn't have. Their emancipation and inheritance before the Civil War gave the Townsends access to freedom and property in a society where Blackness was associated with inferiority and enslavement. Though white communities across the free states often met African American migrants with violence and animosity, some made exceptions for the Townsends, who brought desirable capital that those communities wouldn't easily turn away. Money made a big difference. But Samuel and Edmund Townsend had given their children another powerful bequest, their mixed race ancestry. The Townsends occupied a shifting space in between black and white. And in the 19th century, racial lines were more flexible and porous than they would become with the later establishment of the Jim Crow era's one drop rule. As historian Martha Hodes has written, factors such as skin color, education, and property ownership could all combine to move a mixed race person closer to the social status of whiteness and all the privileges that came along with it. This more flexible racial system gave people like the Townsends the maneuverability to shape their own identities and perhaps climb to a higher rung on the social ladder. Geography, like money and mixed race ancestry, played a role as well. When Samuel's son Charles Osborne traveled to Georgetown, Colorado in the late 1860s, he found a community where white and black settlers played on the same baseball team, attended each other's weddings, and formed business partnerships. Demographics played a key role here. In Colorado, white Americans saw Native Americans, such as the Ute peoples, who were the original inhabitants of the region, and Chinese migrant laborers as the outsiders, not African American settlers who joined them in such small numbers and shared their religion and customs. In this place and time, white Colorado residents saw African Americans like the Townsends as part of the in group, not as others. It was a very different situation than what his family members encountered in Ohio, Kansas, and back in Alabama. The Townsends' diverse experiences in all of their lives and travels, like Charles Osborne's in Colorado, reveal a landscape of opportunity and oppression where meanings of race and freedom, as well as concrete opportunities for social and economic mobility, were dependent on highly local norms and values. At different moments throughout their lives, the Townsends' race, place, and money gave them the ability to experience freedom on their own terms. At other times, their dreams were frustrated and their lives upended by racial prejudice, like countless other freed people across the United States. Happy Dreams of Liberty is the story of one family living in a turbulent time, a testament to the unexpected opportunities and all too common obstacles they faced as they pursued that truly American dream, moving up in the world. Again, my name is Isabela Morales, and I hope you'll take a look at my book, Happy Dreams of Liberty: An American Family in Slavery and Freedom. Thank you for listening.